We've seen how the us versus them dynamic can be incredibly powerful, even shaping our automatic reactions. But here's the kicker. Automatic doesn't mean inevitable. Our conscious minds can actually push back against these ingrained biases. Think about it like trying to rewire a bit of faulty code in your brain. One classic trick is perspective taking. Instead of just telling someone, don't think stereotypes, you get them to actually inhabit the viewpoint of the group they might be biased against. A study showed this worked wonders for age bias. Getting people to imagine life as an older person reduced prejudice more effectively than just asking them to suppress stereotypical thoughts. It's like empathy training for the amygdala. Another approach? Forcefully focusing on counter stereotypes. If you tell men to consciously picture a strong, capable woman with positive traits, their automatic sexual biases tend to lessen more than if you just ask them to try not to think stereotypically. It's like actively replacing the default software with a more balanced version. And finally, sometimes just shining a light on the bias itself helps. Making implicit biases explicit, showing people evidence of their own unconscious prejudices, can jolt them into awareness and potentially reduce the bias. We'll dig deeper into these strategies later. Now, let's talk about how we rank and categorize people. We're walking around, carrying a whole mental Rolodex of us-them, divisions, race, gender, age, socioeconomic status, you name it. The fascinating thing is we can shift which category we use to sort people, often automatically. It's like having different filters on your mental camera. You can flip a switch and suddenly start seeing people by shirt color instead of race, or emphasize gender over ethnicity when thinking about math ability. This isn't always a good thing, mind you. Sometimes it's just swapping one label for another, like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Remember that study with European American men looking at photos of Asian women? If the woman was applying makeup, gender became the automatic category. If she was using chopsticks, ethnicity took precedence. It shows how easily we toggle. But the real magic, the truly effective way to bridge the us-them gap, is to shift the them into being perceived as an us. How? By emphasizing shared attributes, common ground. It's about finding the overlap in the Venn diagram and highlighting it, making the difference seem less significant. This sets the stage for understanding how bringing groups together actually works. Gordon Allport's contact theory, a cornerstone of social psychology born way back in the 1950s. Now, the popular simplified version you hear is something like, just stick hostile groups together, say teenagers from rival countries at a summer camp, and poof, all the hatred vanishes, everyone realizes they're more alike than different, and suddenly they're all use. Sounds great, right? Wrong. That's the inaccurate version. Reality is messier. Putting us and thems together under very specific, narrow conditions might lead to something resembling harmony, but screw it up, and you could actually make things worse. Think about it like mixing chemicals. You need the right proportions and environment. So, what are those magic ingredients for successful contact? First, roughly equal numbers from each side, no power imbalances. Second, everyone gets treated equally and unambiguously, no preferential treatment for either group. Third, the contact needs to be lengthy, not just a quick meet and greet, and ideally happen on neutral, benevolent territory, somewhere neither side feels inherently disadvantaged. And crucially, there need to be superordinate goals, tasks that everyone cares about and works on together, like turning that overgrown meadow into a soccer field. It's about shared purpose, not just proximity. Let's revisit two big ideas we touched on earlier. First, the tendency to see them groups as monolithic, simple, and possessing some unchangeable, often negative, essence. Think of the lazy poor or ignorant immigrant stereotypes. Second, the idea that forcing yourself to think of a them individual as a unique person, with their own story and characteristics, makes them seem more like an use. This individuation process breaks down the essentialist view. And guess what? Using this technique to decrease essentialist thinking is incredibly powerful. Here's a striking example. Researchers gave white participants a questionnaire about their acceptance of racial inequalities. Beforehand, they were given one of two primes. One prime bolstered essentialist thinking about race, suggesting scientists had found genetic underpinnings. The other prime was anti-essentialist, stating scientists revealed race has no genetic basis. What happened? Those primed with the essentialist idea were significantly more likely to accept racial inequalities. It's like reinforcing the idea that race is fixed and biologically determined makes people more comfortable with the status quo, even if it's unjust. Powerful stuff, isn't it? Okay, hierarchy, no surprise here. Making hierarchies steeper, more impactful, or more overtly visible tends to make the theming worse. Why? Because the need for justification kicks in. Those at the top often feel compelled to explain why they're on top, and a common tactic is to pour stereotypes onto the heads of those struggling at the bottom. These stereotypes can range from the relatively benign high warmth slash low competence, maybe they're nice, but lazy, to the downright nasty low warmth slash low competence, lazy and mean. And it goes both ways. Those at the bottom often reciprocate with simmering resentment, perceiving the ruling class as low warmth slash high competence. They're nice, but they're exploiting us. Fiska's research highlights how viewing the underclass as high warmth slash low competence can actually stabilize the status quo. It makes the powerful feel self-congratulatory about their presumed benevolence, while simultaneously placating the subordinated with a sop of respect. Jost's work adds another layer. Cultural myths like poor but happy or the rich are unhappy and stressed Scrooge versus Cratchits can be potent tools for maintaining the system. They rationalize inequality, making it seem natural or even desirable for some. Even the trope of poor but honest serves to throw a little prestige back at the Thames, further justifying the existing order. Not everyone reacts to hierarchy in the same way. Individual differences play a huge role. Two key concepts here are social dominance orientation, how much someone values power and prestige, and right-wing authoritarianism, RWA, valuing centralized authority, law, and convention. People high in SDO or RWA tend to show more prejudice, especially when feeling threatened. They're more likely to accept bias against lower status outgroups, and if male, more tolerant of sexism. They also tend to shrug off hostile humor aimed at outgroups. Now remember, we belong to multiple us/them categories and multiple hierarchies simultaneously. Think about it. Your rank in your company softball league probably matters more to you than your rank in your actual job, right? Especially if you're captain. This gets really interesting when these hierarchies overlap with us/them categories, like when race or ethnicity heavily intersects with socioeconomic status. In those cases, those on top often push for assimilation into the dominant group's values. Interestingly, this varies geographically. In the US, whites often favor assimilation into a unified national identity, while African Americans might lean towards pluralism. But flip that around to campus life at historically black universities, and the dynamics can shift again. We can hold contradictory views if it benefits us. Let's take a detour with an analogy, because it really drives home the point. Think about stress. We used to die from plagues and smallpox. Now we often succumb to stress-related diseases, lifestyle issues like heart disease or diabetes, where damage accumulates slowly over time. We understand how stress can cause or worsen illness, even down to the molecular level. Stress can even target your immune system, causing hair follicles to turn gray. All true. Yet stress researchers don't aim to eliminate or cure us of stress. Why not? Because it can't be done, and even if it could, we wouldn't want it. We love stress when it's the right kind. We call it stimulation. The analogy for us versus them is obvious. From horrific barbarity to countless microaggressions, the US versus them dynamic has caused immense pain. But our goal isn't to cure ourselves of this fundamental human tendency. It can't be done without destroying parts of our brains, and even if we could, we wouldn't want to lose the ability to form groups, to feel like part of something larger, to have sides. So, if we accept that there will always be sides, us versus them, what's the takeaway? It's a non-trivial to-do list item to always be on the side of angels. It means actively without working against the grain. Distrust essentialism, the idea that groups are fixed and simple. Recognize that what seems like rationality is often just rationalization, playing catch-up with unconscious forces. Focus on the larger shared goals that unite us. Practice perspective taking relentlessly. Individuate constantly. See people as individuals, not just labels. And remember the historical lessons about how truly malignant groups often hide their true nature and make others the scapegoat. As the author puts it, even a solitary person like themselves has experienced exquisite happiness from feeling like part of an us, accepted, safe, understood, part of something larger, doing both well and good. There are even us versus thems they'd fight for. So, the challenge isn't to eliminate the US versus them instinct, but to cultivate wisdom and compassion in its expression. Give the right of way to the car with the mean people sucks sticker, and remind everyone we're all in it together against the real villains. Alright, let's pivot to Chapter 12, Hierarchy, Obedience, and Resistance. At first glance, this seems like a natural extension of our previous discussion on us versus them. Us versus them is about relations between groups, our tendency to favor our in-group. Hierarchy, meanwhile, is about relations within group, our tendency to favor people close in rank to us. We see similar themes recurring, like these tendencies appearing early in life and across species. But hierarchy also interacts with us versus them. Remember that study where people were more likely to categorize racially ambiguous individuals as black if they were dressed in low-status clothes and white if in high-status clothes? That shows how race and socioeconomic status hierarchies overlap in our minds. However, hierarchy takes us in different directions with uniquely human twists. Unlike most species, we occasionally get to choose our leaders. And these leaders often aren't just highest ranking. They attempt to lead, aiming for this thing called the common good. Different political ideologies represent competing visions of that common good. Finally, we express obedience not just to a specific authority figure, but to the abstract concept of authority itself. So what exactly is a hierarchy? Simply put, it's a ranking system that formalizes unequal access to limited resources. Think meat, shelter, mating opportunities, or that intangible thing called prestige. When primatologists looked at hierarchies in other species back in the 1960s, the picture was pretty straightforward: a stable, linear hierarchy. An alpha individual dominates everyone, the beta dominates everyone except the alpha, and so on down the line. This system establishes a status quo by ritualizing inequalities. Imagine two baboons encountering a shaded spot. Without a clear dominance structure, it could lead to a costly fight. Instead, with a hierarchy, a subordinate usually just knows better and avoids conflict. Over figs, grooming rights, whatever, fights are rare, and a simple threat display like a yawn revealing canines often suffices. The old idea, championed by folks like Marlin Perkins, was group selection. The species benefits from a stable social order where everyone knows their place. This view was fueled by the belief that the alpha male was a leader, doing useful things for the group. Irvin DeVore famously claimed baboon alphas led foraging, hunts, defended against lions, disciplined kids, even changed light bulbs. Spoiler alert, that turned out to be nonsense. Alpha males don't know the best direction to go. They often transfer into troops as adolescents, and no one really follows them. Old females guide foraging. Hunts are chaotic free-for-alls. And while an alpha might defend a kid, it's usually their own offspring. Otherwise, they grab the best spot. When we strip away the Perkins-colored glasses, what are the real benefits of hierarchy? They're largely individualistic. Interactions that reinforce the status quo clearly benefit the upper crust. For subordinates, it's often better to avoid conflict altogether. Getting a slightly worse spot than getting slashed by a dominant is logical in a static, hereditary system. But in systems where ranks can change, subordinates face a dilemma. They need to balance caution with the occasional challenge. Because the current alpha might be past his prime, relying solely on bluff. This is the classic pecking order, like in chickens. Variations exist. Some species, like marmoset monkeys, don't have a smooth gradient of rank. There's the alpha and then everyone else with fairly equal relations. In species with gradations, do primates actually perceive these differences? Or is rank just a number in the primatologist's head? Do they care if number 2 and 3 are feuding or if 9 and 10 are friendly? Studies suggest they do. A baboon interacts differently with someone just one step above versus 5 steps above. They also notice tensions between ranks that don't directly involve them. Recall the study where researchers spliced vocalizations to create social scenarios. Play a recording of number 10 giving a dominance call and number 1 responding subordinately, and everyone pays attention. It's like gossip. Whoa, Bill Gates just panhandled a homeless guy. Ravens, those outrageously smart birds, do this too, discerning dominance relations just by listening, even about neighboring flocks. Now, let's consider the nitty-gritty of rank. What does life feel like at different ranks? Does being high-ranking just mean people keep tabs on you, or does it mean survival depends on it? How often do subordinates challenge dominance? How easily do dominants vent frustration? Do subordinates have coping mechanisms, like grooming partners? Then there's attainment. How do you get to the top? In many cases, like female baboons, rank is inherited, heavily influenced by kin selection. But in other species or sexes, like male baboons, ranks shift through fights, showdowns, Shakespearean drama. Rising up is about brawn, sharp teeth, winning the right battles. Hurrah for clawing your way to the top. But what about maintaining that rank once attained? Turns out, it's less about muscle and more about social skills. This leads us to a key point. Social competence is challenging, and it's reflected in the brain. British anthropologist Robin Dunbar showed that across various animal groups, bigger average social group size correlates with larger brains relative to body size, and specifically, a larger neocortex relative to brain size. His influential social brain hypothesis links evolutionary expansion of the neocortex to increased social complexity. This holds true within species too. A neuroimaging study with captive macaques housed in different sized groups found that bigger groups correlated with thicker prefrontal cortex and superior temporal gyrus involved in theory of mind, and tighter coupling between them. Bigger social groups mean bigger, more connected brains for managing those relationships. This complexity increases in fission-fusion species, where group size changes dramatically. Baboons start and end the day in a large troop, but forage in small groups midday. Hyenas hunt in groups but scavenge alone. Wolves often do the opposite. Being away from someone makes it tempting to check if dominance relations have shifted since breakfast. A study comparing fission-fusion primates like chimps, bonobos, spider monkeys, and non-fission-fusion ones like gorillas, capuchins showed fission-fusion species performed better on frontocortical tasks and had larger neocortices. Corvids like crows and ravens show the same pattern. So rank and hierarchy in other animals are far from straightforward. Now, let's bring it home to humans. Human hierarchies resemble those of other species in many ways. Stable hierarchies like centuries of Tsarist rule versus unstable ones like the Russian Revolution evoke different brain patterns. Group size matters too. Primate species with bigger groups have larger cortices, and humans are right at the top. Plotting neocortex size against average group size across primates gives us Dunbar's number. The predicted average group size in traditional human cultures, around 150 people. And guess what? Evidence supports this prediction. In the Western world, people with larger social networks calculated via email texting contacts tend to have larger VMPFC, orbital PFC, and amygdala, and better theory of mind skills. Does bigger network cause bigger brain regions, or do bigger brain regions predispose people to form larger networks? Probably some of both. Just like in other species, human quality of life varies wildly with rank. There's a huge difference between the powerful getting seated before you at a restaurant and the powerful being able to behead you if the fancy strikes. Remember that study showing higher income inequality across 37 countries correlates with more pre-adolescent bullying. Basically, countries with brutal socioeconomic hierarchies produce kids who enforce their own hierarchies more brutally. But amid these similarities, there are uniquely human aspects. First, membership in multiple hierarchies. We can be high rank in one area and low rank in another. This invites rationalization and system justification, deciding why hierarchies where we struggle are bad, but the ones where we succeed are great. Implicit in this is overlap. Consider socioeconomic status encompassing both local and global hierarchies. You might be doing great locally fancy car, but terrible globally compared to Bill Gates. Second, specialization of ranking systems. A high-ranking chimp is generally good at related things, but humans can dwell in incredibly specialized hierarchies. Think Joey Chestnut, the competitive hot dog eating champion god in that subculture. Does his skill generalize? Probably not. Third, internal standards. Winning or losing a team sport affects testosterone, but it's subtler than that. Testosterone tracks winning through skill rather than luck, and individual performance rather than team outcome. We have internal metrics beyond just the external world. How do we detect rank? Just like detecting thems, we're intensely interested and remarkably adept at spotting rank differences. We can distinguish a dominant face direct gaze from a subordinate one averted gaze, lowered brows in just 40 milliseconds. Status is also signaled in the body, though less accurately. Dominance with an exposed torso, arms open, subordination with arms sheltering a bent torso. Again, we recognize these cues automatically. Even human infants recognize status differences. A clever study showed toddlers looking longer when a big square gave in to a little square during a bumping interaction, violating expectations. But wait, maybe it's just physics? The researchers eliminated this confound. The subordinating square fell in the opposite direction from physics prediction, prostrating itself before the alpha square. Regardless of who wins, infants look longer at the conflict situation than peaceful gliding. This intense interest in hierarchy is logical self-interest. Knowing the lay of the land helps navigate it. But it's also about gossip, mostly about status. Are there any fallen mighty? Have the meek inherited anything lately? What's happening in our brains? Prefrontal cortex is involved, especially VLPFC and DLPFC, reflecting affective and cognitive components. Superior temporal gyrus STG theory of mind also activates, coupling with PFC, especially for opposite sex. Contemplating unstable hierarchies activates the amygdala too, reflecting the unsettling effects. Your own rank logically does things to your brain. In macaque monkeys, increased rank correlates with increased mesolimbic dopamine signaling, the reward pathway lights up. Remember that study showing larger group size and higher rank within that group led to greater expansion and functional coupling of the STG and PFC? Consistent with that, a mouse study showed manipulating excitatory inputs to the mouse equivalent of the cognitive DLPFC directly changed the animal's rank. So, what's the interpretation? In many social species, attaining high rank is about sharp teeth and good fighting skills. But maintaining high rank? That's about social intelligence and impulse control, knowing which provocations to ignore, which coalitions to form, understanding others' actions. Does the monkey make history, or does history make the monkey? Did dominant individuals respond with bigger brain regions, or were they already endowed with them? While we don't have pre-post imaging data, subsequent work suggests attaining rank drives the brain changes. The mouse study points the other way. Changing the brain changed the rank. It seems like a virtuous cycle. Brain shapes behavior, behavior shapes brain, and so on. What about biological differences outside the brain as a function of rank? Let's talk hormones, specifically testosterone. Folk endocrinology always assumed high rank equals high testosterone, with the latter powering the former. But in primates, neither is the case. In stable hierarchies, low-ranking adolescent males often have the highest testosterone, constantly starting fights they can't finish. When high rank and high testosterone do correlate, it's usually because dominant individuals have higher rates of sexual behavior, driving secretion. An exception is during unstable times, like after a new troop forms, when high testosterone, high rank reflects high fighting rates among the top males. The challenge hypothesis explains this. T elevation is about responding to challenges. Whether status is maintained aggressively or by writing delicate haikus, testosterone fuels that mode of response. Next, stress hormones, glucocorticoids. Is it more stressful to be dominant or subordinate? Let's dive into that. An extensive literature suggests control and predictability reduce stress. But Joseph Brady's famous 1958 monkey study suggested otherwise. Half the monkeys could press a bar to delay shocks executives. The passive half received shocks whenever the executive did. The executives with control and predictability were more likely to ulcerate. This birthed executive stress syndrome. Control, leadership, responsibility equals stress. Sounds familiar, right? But here's the huge problem. Brady didn't randomly assign monkeys. Those pressing the bar fastest were made executives, and those monkeys were shown to be more emotionally reactive, neurotic types prone to ulcers. So much for ulcerating executives. Contemporary studies show the worst stress-related health typically occurs in middle management, that killer combo of high demands, low autonomy, responsibility without control. By the 1970s, the dogma shifted. Subordinates are the most stressed and unhealthy. Rodent studies showed subordinate animals typically had elevated resting glucocorticoids, chronically activating the stress response even without stress. Same in primates, hamsters, wolves, rabbits, fish, sugar gliders. In extreme cases, like monkeys subordinated to death, they showed hippocampal damage, sensitive to glucocorticoid excess. My own baboon work confirmed this. Low-ranking males had elevated basal glucocorticoids, sluggish stress responses, slow recovery, remarkably similar to the physiological profile of human depression. This chronic stress translated into poor cardiovascular health, immune impairments, slower wound healing, disrupted testicular function, lower growth factors. Try not to be a subordinate baboon. Back to the chicken and egg. Does physiology cause rank or vice versa? In captive populations, the physiological features of a rank generally follow, rather than precede, the establishment of the rank. So I happily proclaimed these findings reflected the nature of hierarchy and the stressfulness of subordination. Totally wrong. Gene Altman and Susan Alberts studied wild baboons and found the familiar picture. Subordination linked to elevated glucocorticoids. But unexpectedly, alpha males also had elevated glucocorticoids, similar to the lowest rankers. Why is life more stressful for alpha than beta males? Turns out, alphas fight more often and spend more time in sexual consortships, which are majorly stressful due to defending them from harassing males. Irony. A chief benefit of alpha dom can be a major stressor. Be careful what you wish for. Okay, so except for the curse of being alpha, social subordination is generally stressful. But this is also wrong. It's not just the rank that matters, but what the rank means. Basal glucocorticoid levels are elevated in subordinates if dominants frequently displace aggression, subordinates lack coping outlets like grooming partners, or have no relatives present. Conversely, dominant animals had the highest glucocorticoids in troops with instability centered at the top. The meaning of rank varies. And superimposed on all this, personality shapes the perception of reality. Using the word personality about other species used to cause tenure, but it's now a hot topic. Individuals in other species have stable differences in temperament, how likely they are to displace aggression when frustrated, how affiliative they are, how rattled they get by novelty. Primates differ as to whether watering holes are half empty or full. In the context of hierarchy, some number twos care only about not being number one, while some number nines gain comfort from not being number 10. Not surprisingly, personality influences the rank-health relationship. For the same high rank, an individual is less healthy if they're particularly reactive to novelty, see threats everywhere, don't use social control, can't differentiate between good and bad news, or lack social outlets. You could make a living giving baboons how to succeed in business seminars based on these factors. Meanwhile, for the same low rank, an individual tends to be healthier if they have lots of grooming relationships or someone even lower ranking to serve as a target for displaced aggression. So in other species, how rank affects the body depends on the specifics of the hierarchy, the social group, and the individual's personality. What about humans? And us? A smidgen of neurobiology research has examined differences in how people feel about hierarchy. Remember social dominance orientation SDO, how much someone values power and prestige. One study showed subjects viewing someone in pain activates empathy that Gus circuits to CC/insula. Higher SDO scores correlated with less activation in those regions. Those valuing power and prestige seemed less likely to feel for those less fortunate. What about biological correlates of human rank? In some ways, we're more subtle than other primates, in others, far less so. Two studies examined high-status individuals, government or military officers. Compared to low-status controls, these folks had lower basal glucocorticoids, less anxiety, enhanced sense of control, causality unclear, rank or unstressed profile. Baboons redux. But something subtler was happening. Deconstructing high rank, lots of subordinates, lots of autonomy, lots of direct supervisees. High rank came with low stress, anxiety only insofar as it meant lots of subordinates and authority. Having to directly supervise lots of people did not predict good outcomes. This gives credence to executives belly-aching about having 11 bosses, not supervising 11 people. To accrue the full physiological benefits of high status, glide like a master of the universe while minions smile obsequiously. It's not just rank, it's what rank entails. In what sense is the status-health relationship in humans less subtle? Socioeconomic status. The SES/health gradient is ubiquitous. Life expectancy and disease incidence/morbidity are worse in poor people, regardless of gender, age, race, healthcare system, or ethnic tensions. Which comes first, poverty or poor health? Overwhelmingly the former. Developing in a low SES womb predicts poorer adult health. Is it just lack of healthcare access? No, the gradient exists in countries with universal health care and for diseases independent of care. Only about a third of the variability is explained by risk factors like pollution or lack of protective factors like gym memberships. The gradient seems to be about the psychological baggage of SES. Subjective SES predicts health at least as accurately as objective AS. It's not about being poor, it's about feeling poor. Independent of absolute income, more income inequality steepens the gradient, rubbing noses in low status. Lots of inequality lowers social capital trust efficacy, directly causing poor health. Collectively, these show the psychological stress of low SES decreases health. Consistent with that, diseases most sensitive to stress cardiovascular, GI, psychiatric show the steepest gradients. When humans invented material inequality, they came up with a way of subjugating the low ranking like nothing ever seen in the primate world. Amidst all this, one of the most distinctive and recent human quirks is choosing our leaders. Outdated primatology confused high rank with leadership silly ways. An alpha male baboon isn't a leader, he just gets the best stuff. Old females guide foraging, but they're going, not leading. Humans have leaders, anchored in the unique notion of the common good. What counts as the common good varies wildly siege of a castle or bird-watching walk. Even more newfangled is choosing our leaders. How do we choose? Conscious choices include voting for experience or competence. Looks matter. Single issues dog catcher stance on drone warfare. Likability Bush v. Kerry. But unconscious biases are powerful. Better looking candidates win more often. Masculine traits for men. This fits the beauty is good stereotype. Attractive people rated as better personalities, higher morals, kinder, honest, trustworthy, treated better, hired more, paid more, less likely convicted. Friedrich Schiller. Physical beauty is the sign of an interior beauty. Use of collective pronouns we, us in speeches attracts votes. Contingent preferences older, masculine faces for war, intelligent faces for cooperation. These biases are present early kids pick winners based on faces. Scientists speculate why preference for masculine faces in wartime leaders might link to aggression needed for war. Regardless of causes, the power of these forces is undeniable. 5-year-olds pick winners with 71% accuracy. Our conscious cognitions then play catch-up to make our decisions seem wise. So, humans keep getting weirder, multiple hierarchies, choosing leaders with silly implicit criteria. Now let's plunge into politics. Franz de Waal introduced politics into primatology, meaning Machiavellian intelligence. Here, we'll use a more restricted, starry-eyed sense, politics as the struggle among the powerful with differing visions of the common good. Forget the usual accusations. Assume everyone wants people to do well, but differs on how. We'll focus on 3 issues. First, do political orientations tend to be internally consistent? Do opinions about littering align with views on military actions? Quick answer, usually. Second, do such consistent orientations arise from deep implicit factors with little to do with specific issues? Yup. Third, can we detect bits of biology underlying these factors? Of course. Political orientation tends to be remarkably consistent. Just like with us/them, people who dislike an outgroup on economic grounds are likely to dislike another group on historical or cultural grounds. This consistency explains the humor behind that New Yorker cartoon. Does this dress make me look Republican? Or think of bioethicist Leon Kass, conservative on cloning, also finds public ice cream cone licking repugnant. This suggests political ideology is just one manifestation of broader underlying ideology. Conservatives are more likely than liberals to have cleaning supplies in their bedrooms. Naturally, strict consistency isn't always the rule. Libertarians mix social liberalism with economic conservatism. Black Baptist churches are traditionally economically liberal, but socially conservative. Neither extreme is monolithic, but the building blocks of political orientation tend to be stable and internally consistent. It's usually possible to dress like a Republican or lick ice cream like a Democrat. If political ideology is just one manifestation of larger internal forces, are there psychological, affective, cognitive, and visceral ways leftists and rightists differ? This question yields fascinating findings. Let's start with intelligence. Oh, what the hell? Since Adorno in the 1950s, people have suggested lower intelligence predicts conservatism. Some studies support it, some don't. More consistently, lower intelligence links to right-wing authoritarianism, right, fondness for hierarchy. The explanation? Arbu provides simple answers ideal for those with poor abstract reasoning skills. Next, intellectual style. 2 broad themes. 1. Rightists are uncomfortable with ambiguity. The other, leftists potentially have greater integrative complexity. Tetlock. A study asked about poverty causes. Both tended toward personal attributions, lazy initially. But give liberals time, they shifted to situational explanations, stacked against them. Conservatives stayed gut level. This extends beyond politics. Trip over feet while dancing? Snap judgment, clumsy, give liberals time. Maybe the dance is hard. Why the difference? Liberals feel dissonance with gut personal attributions, motivating them to find consonant situational views. Conservatives don't feel this dissonance. They're equally capable of nuanced thinking, but less motivated to push past initial judgments. So, we've journeyed through the intricate landscapes of us versus them, hierarchy, and politics. We've seen how automatic biases, while powerful, can be consciously managed. We've explored how hierarchies aren't simple ladders but complex webs interacting with group dynamics, profoundly impacting our psychology and physiology, often in ways we barely perceive. And we've glimpsed how political orientations often reflect deeper, implicit cognitive and affective styles. Understanding these underlying processes, these hidden gears and levers of human interaction, is absolutely crucial if we want to navigate our social world more effectively, and perhaps, foster a little more well-being for everyone involved. It's a complex picture, but hopefully a clearer one.